It's Saturday afternoon in Manhattan's most exclusive church. 200 of New York's elite have gathered for what was supposed to be the wedding of the year. Marcus Wellington, a self-made tech billionaire worth $50 million, stands at the altar in his custom Armani tuxedo, waiting to marry Victoria Sterling, one of the city's most successful corporate lawyers. The ceremony has reached that pivotal moment where the officiant asks if anyone objects to this union. The silence stretches for what feels like an eternity. Then, the massive oak doors at the back of St. Patrick's Cathedral creak open. Every head turns. Every breath catches. Walking down that sacred aisle, past rows of shocked millionaires and celebrities, is a woman Marcus hasn't seen in 5 years. Sarah Matthews. She's dressed simply in a navy blue dress, her brown hair pulled back modestly. But that's not what makes the entire congregation gasp in unison. It's the child holding her hand. A 4-year-old boy with jet black hair, piercing green eyes, and facial features that are an exact miniature replica of the groom standing frozen at the altar. The resemblance is so striking, so undeniable, that even strangers in the pews immediately understand what they're witnessing. This isn't just any interruption. This is a revelation that's about to shatter not just a wedding, but an entire life built on success, ambition, and the belief that the past stays buried. Marcus Wellington thought he had conquered everything. He'd built an empire from nothing, earned respect from his peers, and found love with a woman who matched his drive and intelligence. In less than 60 seconds, all of that was about to crumble. Because sometimes, the most important chapters of our lives are the ones we never knew were being written. Before we start this incredible story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from our viewers around the world. To understand the magnitude of what happened that day, you need to know who Marcus Wellington really was. This wasn't some spoiled rich kid who inherited daddy's money. Marcus was the American dream personified, a man who clawed his way from absolute poverty to unimaginable wealth through sheer determination and brilliant business instincts. Born in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Detroit, Marcus learned early that if he wanted something, he'd have to earn it himself. His father abandoned the family when Marcus was just 8 years old, leaving his mother Elena to raise 3 children on her waitressing income. While other kids played video games, Marcus was delivering newspapers at 5 in the morning, then heading to school, then working at a local grocery store until closing time. But Marcus had something special. Teachers noticed it first. An ability to see patterns, to solve complex problems, to think several steps ahead of everyone else. He earned a full scholarship to MIT, where he studied computer science and business. Even then, he was working multiple jobs, sending money home to his mother while maintaining a perfect GPA. It was during his junior year at MIT that Marcus met Sarah Matthews. She was studying nursing at a nearby college, working just as hard as he was to build a better life. Sarah came from a similar background, raised by a single mother, no financial safety net, just determination and an unshakable belief that education was the pathway to something better. Their love story began in the most ordinary way. They met at a coffee shop where Sarah worked part-time, serving overpriced lattes to stressed college students. Marcus would come in every Tuesday and Thursday, always ordering the same thing, black coffee and a blueberry muffin, always leaving a generous tip that Sarah knew he couldn't really afford. For 3 years, they were inseparable. Study partners, best friends, and deeply in love. They shared dreams of the future, whispered plans about the life they'd build together once they graduated. Marcus would describe his vision of a tech company that would revolutionize how businesses handled data. Sarah would talk about working in pediatric nursing, helping children from backgrounds like theirs. They were both dreamers, but they were practical dreamers. They knew love alone wouldn't pay the bills. They made sacrifices. Date nights were walks in the park instead of expensive dinners. Gifts were handmade instead of store-bought. But they were happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with sharing their struggles and ambitions with someone who truly understood. Marcus graduated summa cum laude in May 2018. Sarah had 1 more year left in her nursing program. The plan was simple. Marcus would start his company, build it slowly while working a regular job, and once Sarah graduated, they'd move forward together. They even looked at apartments, modest places they could afford on 2 entry-level salaries. But then opportunity knocked in a way neither of them expected. In July 2018, 2 months after graduation, Marcus received a phone call that would change everything. A venture capital firm in Silicon Valley had heard about his senior thesis project, a revolutionary data management system he'd developed. They wanted to meet. Not just a casual conversation, but a formal presentation to their entire investment committee. Marcus had dreamed of this moment, but the timing was terrible. Sarah was entering her final year, working extra shifts to pay for her clinical rotations. Moving to California wasn't an option for her, and Marcus couldn't afford to fly back and forth between coasts. They talked for hours about what to do. Sarah, being the selfless person she was, urged Marcus to go. "This is your chance," she told him. "We can make it work long distance for a year. I'll finish school, you'll get your company started, and then we'll figure out the next step together." Marcus was reluctant to leave. Something felt wrong about it, but the rational part of his brain knew Sarah was right. Opportunities like this didn't come twice. He promised her it would only be temporary. 6 months, maybe a year at most. Just long enough to get investors interested and establish the company. The goodbye at the airport was heartbreaking. Neither of them realized it would be the last time they'd see each other for 5 years. Silicon Valley was intoxicating for a young entrepreneur. The venture capital firm, Pinnacle Investments, didn't just want to fund Marcus's idea, they wanted to fast-track it. They provided him with a luxury apartment, a personal assistant, and access to the best legal and technical minds in the industry. The pace was relentless. 18-hour days became normal. Weekends disappeared. Marcus tried to maintain his relationship with Sarah, but the time difference made everything difficult. When he was free to talk, she was studying or working. When she was available, he was in meetings that couldn't be postponed. Their daily phone calls became every other day, then twice a week, then once a week. The pressure from his investors was immense. They'd invested $2 million in his concept, and they expected total dedication. Marcus's personal assistant, Janet Morrison, was particularly insistent about eliminating distractions. She managed his calendar, his communications, even his personal life with military precision. Successful entrepreneurs make sacrifices, Janet would tell him whenever he expressed guilt about not calling Sarah. You can rebuild relationships later. You can't rebuild missed opportunities. Without realizing it, Marcus began to change. The hungry, humble kid from Detroit was evolving into something else. Someone harder, more focused, more willing to prioritize business over everything else. He told himself it was temporary, that once the company was established, he'd have time for the things that really mattered. But Sarah was struggling too. Her final year of nursing school was brutal. Clinical rotations meant 12-hour shifts at the hospital followed by hours of studying. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and missing the one person who had always been her anchor. She tried calling Marcus, but increasingly, her calls went to voicemail. When he did call back, their conversations felt rushed, distracted. By December 2018, they were talking maybe once every 2 weeks. Sarah sensed something changing in Marcus, a distance that wasn't just geographical. He talked about million-dollar deals and potential acquisitions with an excitement that used to be reserved for their future together. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was December 15, 2018. Sarah had just finished a particularly difficult shift in the pediatric intensive care unit. She was emotionally drained, physically exhausted, and desperate to hear a familiar, loving voice. She called Marcus, but Janet Morrison answered his phone. "Mr. Wellington is in meetings until late tonight," Janet said briskly. "Can I take a message?" "This is Sarah, his girlfriend. I really need to speak with him. I'm sorry, but Mr. Wellington has given strict instructions not to be disturbed during this negotiation period. I can schedule a call for next week." Sarah hung up, tears streaming down her face. She felt like she was losing the most important person in her life to a world she couldn't compete with. She didn't know that Marcus never received that message. Janet, believing she was protecting her boss from distractions, had made an executive decision about what qualified as urgent business communications. 2 weeks later, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. Sarah stared at the pregnancy test for 10 minutes, hoping the result would somehow change. 2 pink lines. Pregnant. She was 22 years old, in her final semester of nursing school, working part-time to pay for her education, and the father of her baby was 3,000 miles away building a business empire. Her first instinct was to call Marcus immediately. This wasn't something that could wait for scheduled phone calls or go through assistants. She tried his cell phone 5 times. Voicemail. She tried his office number. Janet Morrison answered. "I need to speak with Marcus right now," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "It's an emergency." "What kind of emergency?" Janet asked with professional coldness. Sarah hesitated. This wasn't something she wanted to announce to a virtual stranger. "It's personal. Very personal. Please, just tell him Sarah called and needs to speak with him immediately. Mr. Wellington is in final negotiations for a major acquisition. Unless someone is dying, I cannot interrupt him." Sarah hung up, frustrated and heartbroken. She tried 3 more times over the next 2 days. Each time, Janet told her Marcus was unavailable and took a message that apparently never reached him. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had given Janet strict instructions about managing his personal life during this crucial business period. "I need total focus right now," he had told her. "Screen all my calls. If it's not business critical, handle it yourself or schedule it for later." Janet took this directive seriously. In her mind, she was protecting Marcus from unnecessary emotional complications during the most important period of his career. Personal relationship drama was exactly the kind of distraction that could derail everything they'd worked for. After a week of failed attempts to reach Marcus, Sarah made one of the most difficult decisions of her life. She would handle this pregnancy alone, at least initially. She couldn't keep disrupting his business dealings with phone calls he apparently didn't want to take. If their relationship meant so little to him that he couldn't return urgent calls from his girlfriend of 3 years, then maybe she needed to accept that reality. Sarah was practical by nature. She analyzed her situation with the same methodical approach she used for her nursing studies. She had 4 months left in her program. She could complete her degree while pregnant, start working as a registered nurse, and provide for her child. It wouldn't be easy, but her mother had raised 3 children alone. Sarah could raise 1. She made another decision that would prove crucial years later. She wouldn't ask Marcus for money or support. If he wanted to be part of this child's life, it would be because he chose to be, not because he was legally or financially obligated. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, Marcus was experiencing the most successful period of his life. His company, Dataflow Solutions, was attracting major clients. Revenue was growing exponentially. Investment firms were calling daily with acquisition offers that started at $20 million and kept climbing. He was also dating Victoria Sterling. Marcus met Victoria at a tech industry gala in February 2019. She was there representing one of her corporate clients, and he was receiving an award for emerging entrepreneurs. Victoria was everything Sarah wasn't: sophisticated, connected, wealthy, and operating in the same high-stakes business world that had become Marcus's universe. Their relationship developed gradually. Victoria understood the demands of building a career. She didn't need constant communication or emotional reassurance. She was building her own legal empire and appreciated a partner who respected professional ambition above everything else. Marcus told himself he wasn't cheating on Sarah. They hadn't officially broken up, but they hadn't really been together for months either. Their last conversation had been brief and awkward, filled with long silences and unspoken resentments. He assumed Sarah had moved on too. By summer 2019, Marcus had completely reinvented himself. He was worth $15 million, lived in a penthouse apartment, and was engaged in a serious relationship with one of New York's most successful attorneys. The hungry kid from Detroit was gone, replaced by a polished businessman who wore $1,000 suits and made decisions that affected hundreds of employees. He thought about Sarah sometimes, usually late at night when the business meetings finally ended and he was alone with his thoughts. He wondered if she'd finished nursing school, if she was happy, if she ever thought about their time together. But these moments of reflection were brief, quickly overwhelmed by the demands of his expanding business empire. Sarah, meanwhile, was learning to navigate single motherhood while completing her nursing degree. Daniel Marcus Matthews was born on September 12, 2019, a healthy, beautiful baby boy with his father's distinctive green eyes and thick black hair. Sarah gave him Marcus's name as a middle name, still hoping that someday, somehow, father and son would meet. The resemblance was striking from the beginning. Daniel looked exactly like the baby pictures Sarah had seen of Marcus. As he grew from infant to toddler, the similarity became even more pronounced. Daniel had Marcus's analytical mind, his ability to focus intensely on problems, his natural leadership qualities that emerged even in preschool. Sarah finished her nursing program when Daniel was 8 months old, graduating with honors despite the challenges of single parenthood. She found work at Portland General Hospital, specializing in pediatric care. It was demanding work, but it paid well enough to support herself and her son comfortably. She never bad-mouthed Marcus to Daniel. When her son asked about his father, Sarah showed him pictures from their college years and told him stories about how smart and ambitious his daddy was. "He's building something important," she would say. "Someday, when you're older, you'll understand." But as Daniel grew and the questions became more frequent and specific, Sarah realized she couldn't protect him from the truth indefinitely. A 4-year-old boy needed more than stories and photographs. He needed his father. By 2023, Daniel was asking questions that broke Sarah's heart. Why doesn't Daddy live with us? When is Daddy coming home? Does Daddy love me? These weren't casual inquiries from a curious child. They were the deep, painful questions of a little boy who was beginning to understand that his family wasn't like other families. Sarah had maintained her policy of not pursuing Marcus for financial support, but she was starting to question whether her pride was hurting her son. Daniel deserved to know his father, and Marcus deserved to know he had a child. Whatever had gone wrong between them as a couple, it shouldn't deprive Daniel of a relationship with his dad. The problem was finding Marcus. She knew his company had been successful, but she didn't know how successful. Her internet searches revealed that Dataflow Solutions had been acquired by a major tech conglomerate for $47 million in 2021. Marcus Wellington was now a wealthy man, but he was also a public figure with layers of security and privacy protection that made him virtually unreachable to ordinary people. Sarah tried the direct approach first. She called Dataflow Solutions, which was now a subsidiary of Tech Global Industries. After being transferred through multiple departments, she finally reached someone who claimed to handle executive communications. "I need to get a message to Marcus Wellington," Sarah explained. "It's a personal matter regarding his son." "Mr. Wellington receives hundreds of personal requests every month," the assistant replied coolly. "We have a standard procedure for these situations. You'll need to submit your request in writing, along with documentation supporting your claim, and our legal department will review it." The process was humiliating. Sarah had to provide proof of Daniel's birth, photographs showing the resemblance, and detailed documentation of her relationship with Marcus. It felt like she was applying for a job or trying to prove her worth to people who treated her like just another person trying to get money from a wealthy man. After 6 weeks, she received a form letter stating that Mr. Wellington's legal team had reviewed her materials and determined that any paternity claims should be handled through the proper legal channels if she wished to pursue the matter further. Sarah was devastated. The man she had loved, the father of her child, was now so insulated by wealth and corporate machinery that she couldn't even deliver a simple message. "You have a son, and he wants to meet you." She considered hiring a lawyer, but the thought of turning Daniel's existence into a legal battle felt wrong. She didn't want Marcus's money. She wanted Daniel to have a father who chose to be present, not one who was legally compelled to acknowledge his child. For months, Sarah struggled with what to do next. Daniel was starting kindergarten, joining Little League, experiencing milestones that should have involved both parents. She took hundreds of photos and videos, documenting every achievement, every funny moment, every sign of the brilliant, kind, curious boy Daniel was becoming. Then, in early 2024, Sarah saw something that changed everything. A social media post from Victoria Sterling's Instagram account showed an elegant engagement ring with the caption, "He asked, I said yes. Planning the wedding of our dreams for September 2024. Marcus was getting married. Soon, he would have a new family, a new life, and any chance for Daniel to know his father would disappear forever." Sarah made a decision that terrified her. She would attend the wedding. Not to create drama or seek revenge, but to give Daniel one last chance to meet his father before it was too late. If Marcus rejected them, at least she would know she had tried everything. The plan required careful research. Sarah discovered that Marcus and Victoria's wedding was scheduled for September 21, 2024, at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. It would be a high-profile event with extensive security, but the ceremony itself was being held in a public church during regular hours. Sarah used her vacation time from the hospital and her modest savings to book flights to New York. She told Daniel they were going on a special trip to meet someone very important. She bought him his best outfit, a small navy suit that made him look heartbreakingly handsome and mature. The morning of the wedding, Sarah sat in their hotel room, brushing Daniel's hair and trying to find the courage to do what she'd planned. Looking at her son's face, seeing so much of Marcus in his features, she knew she couldn't back down now. "Mommy, are we really going to see Daddy today?" Daniel asked, his green eyes wide with hope and excitement. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "We're going to see Daddy today." What Sarah didn't realize was that her appearance at the wedding would do more than just introduce Daniel to his father. It would expose a truth that had been hidden for 5 years, reveal the failures of the people Marcus trusted most, and force him to confront the man he had become versus the man he used to be. September 21, 2024, dawned crisp and clear in Manhattan. St. Patrick's Cathedral had been transformed into a floral masterpiece, with white roses and gold accents creating an atmosphere of elegant sophistication. 200 guests, representing the pinnacle of New York's business and social elite, filled the ornate pews. Marcus stood at the altar, adjusting his platinum cufflinks for the third time in 5 minutes. He looked every bit the successful groom, perfectly tailored tuxedo, confident posture, the bearing of a man who had conquered every challenge life had thrown at him. But those closest to him might have noticed the slight tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept scanning the assembled guests as if searching for something he couldn't quite identify. Victoria was radiant in her custom Vera Wang gown, a masterpiece of silk and intricate beadwork that had taken 8 months to create. Her parents, old-money New York aristocracy, beamed with pride from the front row. This wasn't just a wedding, it was the merging of 2 powerful families, 2 successful careers, 2 people who understood that love in their world came with business plans and prenuptial agreements. The ceremony proceeded flawlessly. Father Mackenzie, who had officiated weddings for 3 generations of Victoria's family, spoke eloquently about the sacred bond of marriage, the importance of commitment, and the joy of 2 souls finding their perfect match in each other. Marcus found himself thinking about his mother, Elena, who sat in the 3rd row wearing the first expensive dress she'd ever owned, a gift from her son who had kept his promise to take care of her once he made it big. She was crying softly, overwhelmed by how far her boy had come from that cramped Detroit apartment. As Father Mackenzie reached the traditional moment in the ceremony, his voice carried clearly through the cathedral. "If anyone present knows of any reason why this couple should not be lawfully joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence that followed was expected, routine, almost ceremonial. These words were a formality, a tradition that existed more for historical completeness than any practical purpose. In modern weddings, especially among the wealthy and well-connected, such interruptions simply didn't happen. But then, the silence stretched a moment too long. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the air itself seems to hold its breath. The massive cathedral doors, each weighing hundreds of pounds, slowly creaked open. Every head turned. 200 guests shifted in their seats, craning their necks to see who would dare enter St. Patrick's Cathedral during the most solemn moment of a wedding ceremony. The sound of footsteps echoed through the sacred space. Not the hurried steps of a latecomer trying to slip in unnoticed, but the deliberate, steady pace of someone with a purpose. Sarah Matthews walked down that aisle with quiet dignity, her hand gently holding that of a 4-year-old boy who looked around the magnificent cathedral with wide, curious eyes. She wasn't dressed to impress or to compete with the elegant guests. Her navy blue dress was simple, modest, appropriate for church. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat chignon. She wore minimal makeup and no jewelry except for a small silver cross necklace, a gift from her mother. But it wasn't Sarah that caused the collective gasp that rippled through the congregation. It was the child beside her. Daniel Matthews looked exactly like Marcus Wellington had looked at the same age. The resemblance was so striking, so undeniable, that even strangers who had never seen baby pictures of the groom immediately understood what they were witnessing. The same thick black hair with a stubborn cowlick that refused to be tamed. The same piercing green eyes that seemed to take in everything around them with intelligent curiosity. The same strong jawline, the same way of holding his shoulders, even the same slight dimple in his left cheek when he looked uncertain. Marcus felt the world stop spinning. His knees nearly buckled as he stared at the child walking toward him. Every rational thought abandoned him. Every carefully constructed wall he'd built around his emotions crumbled in an instant. Victoria's face went white, then red, then white again as she processed what she was seeing. Her perfectly planned wedding, her moment of triumph, was disintegrating before her eyes. But beyond the personal humiliation, Victoria was a sharp lawyer with excellent instincts. She recognized truth when she saw it, and everything about this moment screamed authenticity. The congregation buzzed with shocked whispers. Cell phones appeared despite the strict no photography policy. This wasn't just a wedding interruption, this was a scandal that would be front-page news by evening. Sarah reached the front of the cathedral and stopped about 10 feet from the altar. She looked directly at Marcus, her brown eyes steady and calm despite the magnitude of what she was doing. "Hello, Marcus," she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "I'm sorry to interrupt your wedding, but there's someone who has been wanting to meet you for a very long time." She gently guided Daniel forward one step. "This is your son, Daniel. Daniel Marcus Matthews. He's 4 years old, and he's been asking about his daddy every day since he learned to talk." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Son. 4 years old. Asking about his daddy. The math was simple and devastating. September 2024 minus 4 years equals 2019, which meant conception in late 2018, which meant Marcus's legs finally gave out. He sat down heavily in the ornate chair that had been placed at the altar for the signing of the marriage certificate. His perfectly styled hair fell across his forehead as he buried his face in his hands. Daniel, with the fearless curiosity of a 4-year-old, took another step forward. "Are you my daddy?" he asked in a clear, sweet voice that carried throughout the cathedral. "Mommy showed me pictures, and she said you have the same eyes as me." Marcus looked up, and for the first time in 5 years, he truly saw what mattered most. Not the 200 guests, not the business empire, not the social status or the wealth or the carefully constructed image he'd built. Just a little boy with his own eyes, asking the most important question in the world. "Yes," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "Yes, I'm your daddy." What followed was chaos, but it was the kind of chaos that strips away pretense and reveals truth. Victoria, displaying the strength and dignity that had made her successful in her own right, quietly removed her engagement ring and placed it on the altar. "I think," she said with remarkable composure, "this ceremony needs to be postponed while some very important conversations take place." Father Mackenzie, who had officiated hundreds of weddings over 4 decades, had never encountered anything quite like this. But his pastoral instincts took over. "Perhaps," he suggested gently, "the family would like to use the vestry for some privacy." The guests began to file out, their whispered conversations already building the legend of what would become known as the wedding that never was. But Marcus barely noticed them leaving. His entire focus was on the little boy standing before him, looking up with eyes that were mirror images of his own. Sarah knelt beside Daniel, her arm around his shoulders. "Daniel, this is your daddy, Marcus. Daddy, this is your son." Marcus slid from the chair to his knees, bringing himself to Daniel's eye level. For a long moment, father and son simply looked at each other, processing a connection that was both instant and 4 years overdue. "You're really big," Daniel observed with typical 4-year-old honesty. "Mommy said you were building something important." "What did you build?" Marcus laughed despite his tears. "I built a company, buddy. But I think I forgot to build the most important thing of all." "What's that?" "A relationship with you." Over the next several hours, the truth emerged piece by piece. Marcus learned about Janet Morrison's decision to screen Sarah's calls, about the messages that never reached him, about the desperate attempts Sarah had made to contact him when she discovered her pregnancy. He learned about Daniel's birth, about Sarah working double shifts as a new nurse to support their son, about the birthdays and holidays and milestones he had missed. He learned about Daniel's first words, which were "Dada," spoken while looking at one of the old photographs Sarah had kept, his first steps, his incredible aptitude for mathematics and problem-solving. Sarah learned about Marcus's transformation from the driven but humble young man she had loved into someone who had allowed success to insulate him from the most important relationships in his life. She learned about the pressure he had felt, the sacrifices he thought he was making for their future, the gradual erosion of his values as he climbed higher in the business world. But most importantly, Marcus and Daniel learned about each other. Daniel showed his father the small toy car he had brought to the wedding, a red Ferrari that Sarah had bought him because it looks like something Daddy would drive. Marcus showed Daniel pictures on his phone of the actual red Ferrari in his garage, watching his son's eyes light up with wonder and excitement. "Can we go see it?" Daniel asked. "We can do whatever you want," Marcus replied, meaning every word. The conversation with Victoria came later that evening. She was hurt, certainly, but she was also pragmatic enough to understand that she had been about to marry a man who was fundamentally incomplete without knowing it. "I'm not angry about the child," she told Marcus as they sat in her penthouse apartment, still wearing their wedding attire. "I'm angry that you were capable of building a $50 million business empire but couldn't maintain a personal relationship well enough to know you had become a father." She was right, and Marcus knew it. He had become so focused on external success that he had lost track of internal truth. He had surrounded himself with people who managed his life, rather than people who challenged him to be better. "What happens now?" Victoria asked. "Now I learn how to be the father Daniel deserves," Marcus said. "And I figure out how to make up for 4 years of absence. And us." Marcus looked at the woman he had been about to marry, recognizing her strength and intelligence while also acknowledging that their relationship had been built more on compatibility than on the kind of deep, transformative love he had once shared with Sarah. "I think," he said carefully, "we both deserve partners who make us better people, not just successful people." Victoria nodded, tears in her eyes but resolution in her voice. "I think you're right." 3 months later, Marcus had restructured his entire life. He split his time between New York and Portland, maintaining his business interests while building a relationship with his son. He bought a house in Portland, not far from Sarah's apartment, so Daniel could easily move between his parents' homes. The transition wasn't seamless. 4-year-olds don't automatically accept absent parents, even when they've been asking for them. Daniel had moments of confusion, anger, and testing boundaries that were entirely normal for a child whose world had suddenly expanded to include a father. But Marcus was patient in a way that surprised everyone, including himself. The same intensity he had once applied to business deals, he now applied to learning his son's favorite bedtime stories, understanding his fears, celebrating his achievements. Sarah watched this transformation with amazement and cautious hope. This wasn't the Marcus she had known in college, nor was it the distant businessman who had disappeared into the corporate world. This was someone new, a man who had integrated his ambition with his capacity for love. "You're different," she told him one evening as they watched Daniel play in the park. "I'm the person I was supposed to become," Marcus replied. I just took a longer route to get here. The story of Marcus Wellington's interrupted wedding became legendary in business circles, but not for the reasons he had expected. Instead of being remembered as a scandal or embarrassment, it became known as a powerful reminder that true success includes room for the people who matter most. Marcus never married Victoria Sterling, but they remained friends and occasional business partners. Victoria eventually married a federal judge who appreciated both her professional accomplishments and her capacity for grace under pressure. Sarah never married Marcus either. They had both grown and changed too much to simply resume their college romance. But they became effective co-parents and, eventually, close friends united by their shared commitment to raising an extraordinary little boy. Daniel Marcus Matthews grew up knowing he was loved by both parents, each of whom had learned important lessons about priority, sacrifice, and what it truly means to build something that lasts. And Marcus Wellington, the millionaire whose wedding was interrupted by truth, discovered that the most valuable acquisition of his life hadn't cost him anything except the courage to change. Sometimes the best investments are the ones that pay dividends in love, not dollars. Sometimes the most important meetings are the ones that happen in cathedral aisles, not boardrooms. And sometimes, the greatest success stories begin with the words, "Are you my daddy?" Marcus learned that wealth without connection is just sophisticated poverty, and that the most important empire he could build was the one that existed in a 4-year-old boy's heart, where a father's love was the only currency that mattered.